go ahead and get started, at least with our introductions. First of all, my name is Gina Buchholz. I'm one of the members of the 401k plan professional team. And again, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. As Andy and I were talking, there's a lot of things going on in our world today. It can be kind of heavy and a little bit depressing. We've done webinars on market volatility. We had a webinar last week on the CARES Act and how that relief package is providing some special tax relief to people affected by COVID-19. And this is, like I said, a little bit lighter topic, but we also thought it was very timely. As you are spending a little more time maybe at home with your kids, it's a great time to think about, maybe instilling some new values. So, and I also want to mention too, this is our team, and Jessica, Jenna, and myself, we find this topic, it's so near and dear to us. We're very passionate about it. We all have kids. We're all moms, quite a broad range of ages. My kids are in high school. Jessica's kids are in grade school, and Jenna's kids are in preschool. And obviously we teach financial wellness. We teach about saving and investing. And we also volunteer for a nonprofit organization called Best Prep, where we go into the schools and teach middle school and high school age kids the stock market game. Best Prep is really an organization that's dedicated to improving financial literacy. So if anyone out there has kids that are maybe middle school aged or high school, or you just want to volunteer and you're passionate about this too, certainly just reach out to one of us. We'd be happy to tell you about our experiences with that organization. And just want to remind you too, this is one of our webinars, part of a webinar series. We have 9 of these webinars scheduled in 2020, a variety of topics. Like I said, they've been pretty serious up until today. Hopefully you'll find this a little more fun and interesting and educational. With all of our webinars, we do record them. So the recording will be emailed out to you in about a week or two. And you can also visit our website at 401k Plan Professionals. We house all of our past webinars on there, as well as a lot of educational videos. You can also find some great education on our YouTube channel as well. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our guest speaker. I'm really excited today to have Andy Wahlstrom join us. He is with Wells Fargo Institutional Retirement and Trust. He's a retirement educator, and he has a broad experience in educating. He was an economics TA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He was also an economics and math instructor at a 2-year college. Andy earned his Bachelor's of Arts degree from the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, and he also earned his MBA at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And as if that's not enough, he's currently working on a second master's degree in applied economics and holds a CMFC designation as well. And I'd also like to add that Andy's a dad too, so he's going to get some good practice applying some of these principles as well. So Andy, without further ado, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you.
All right, thanks, Gina. I'm very excited to be here today. I really enjoy this topic, and to talk to you about helping kids learn about financial health. And I think as adults, it is very important to help kids learn healthy, lifelong financial habits. There really isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. So what I'm hoping is that when I'm talking today is either you can implement those ideas directly, or it just serves as a catalyst for you to think of some ideas that would work for you and your kids. And in fact, Gina mentioned submitting any questions. If you have any other ideas that I haven't mentioned, you can submit those, and maybe we could share those too at the end. As long as I don't talk too much and I give us enough time. But I enjoy talking about this. As you can see here, we're going to talk about how to teach kids about money at every stage, some budgeting basics, some helpful tools and resources, and then just how to make an impact today. And so on the next slide, it just says how to teach younger children about money. So we're going to start with the fundamentals. And I just want to share a story before I get into this checklist here. And I am a dad, as Gina said. I do have a 3-year-old. She just turned 3 years old this week. And I'm going to wrap this back into what we're talking about. But last summer, we went to a friend's wedding, and we were exploring the town, and in the town square, there was a group of 5 musicians that were playing together. And my daughter really took to the violinist. And we recorded them, we gave them some money, we recorded them. And my daughter loves that video and watches it. And whenever she's around the house, she'll pick up 2 things, like 2 sticks, and pretend that she's playing a violin with it. And she was just really excited about that. And so my mom, grandma, found a used children's violin and gave it to her for Christmas. My wife and I, we don't know how violins work, and we didn't watch her closely enough, and it broke. And so we're going to get it fixed. And my mom said, bring it to me. I know someone who can fix it. And then it's going to be, a week or 2 before she can get it back. And this is where it all wraps back in. She said, that's very important to learn deferred gratification. And so my mom was an elementary or early childhood teacher. She just talked about how important that is. And then I went back and thought about my childhood and how much she instilled that in me, and my dad too. And I'll use some of those examples. But just deferred gratification, how much that just touches financial health in so many different realms. And we'll see that as a theme as we go through the list today. So here it says, start with the fundamentals, set an example. Kids are sponges. They watch everything you do. So I think it's more important than what we tell them is how we act and how we behave. So they're going to watch how you spend money. If you're having arguments about money, they're going to make note of that. So keep that in mind. Just be a good example. And next up, make it part of regular conversations. And I don't think it's too early. I've done that at the grocery store with my daughter back when we went to the grocery store together. So when she was even 1, I would give her the card and she would put it in the reader, and she understood that we were paying for things. And then the next time we went to the grocery store, she would grab something off the shelf. I would ask her to grab something, and she would say, Dad, this is not ours. This belongs to the grocery store. We have to pay for it first. So even though she's only 3, I think, or at that time, 1 or 2, there are little lessons that you can teach throughout the way and just engage them in what you're doing. Have those regular conversations. Talk about needs versus wants. I will use examples of my parents throughout this because I think I learned a lot from them and they did a great job. So one thing I remember is a conversation with my mom, and we had an appliance in our kitchen go out. I don't remember the appliance, dishwasher, but that wasn't important. What was important is that my mom took me aside and said, we're going to be able to replace that with a new one because we're not spending money on all the things I asked for. The Atari, the bigger TV, the swimming pool. I want a swimming pool like so-and-so. And so I remember that to this day. And she, just as part of our regular conversations, had that conversation about needs versus wants. Trade-offs, needs versus wants. I mean, that captures trade-offs too. I taught econ for a long time. We always talk about trade-offs and opportunity costs. So, if you want this thing, then we can't buy this other thing. And letting kids know that we do have limited resources, and we have to figure out how to best spend those limited resources. The next one on here, encourage them to think before they buy. I think of my dad's subscription to Consumer Reports, going back to setting an example. When I was a kid, I wasn't going to buy any toasters or cars or refrigerators, but I would see my dad's Consumer Reports around the house. I figured that was something important, and I found them interesting, and I would read them. When it came time for me to buy my first car, I bought a Honda Accord because I remembered it from Consumer Reports. It lasted me 11 years, which means I went 7 years without a car payment. So just little things like that you can have around the home, that you can use to set examples, have those conversations, I just feel are incredibly important to helping your kid learn as best as they can about financial health and wellness. The last one on here is stress the importance of giving too. I find it interesting these days in these current times that, you know, giving is going to the restaurant that you always went to before, but now they can only do takeout. So that makes us feel good to go up there and get a takeout order from that restaurant. So there is something there when you're spending your money, it can make you feel really good about things, and encourage, you know, children to know, you know, to figure out the difference between something that makes you feel good and might have a lasting effect versus something that makes you feel good and may have a fleeting effect. We do tend to adjust to things that we have. If we get something like a really nice car, we tend to adjust to that over time. It can be a little more fleeting than our interactions with people and our memories. So the next slide talks a little bit about an allowance. So allowances can be controversial because it does imply that you have to pay your kid to do things around the house that you feel they should just do anyway without having that pecuniary or financial incentive. So people are going to have different opinions on this, and it's okay. The way my parents did it is that they told me it was a privilege. It's not a right. It wasn't really tied to anything. They said they were going to give me 25 cents a week. So that either gives you a clue as to how old I am or how cheap my parents are, or a combination of the two. But the thing I really wanted was a Pyramix. So it was like a Rubik's Cube, but it was a pyramid. Well, technically not a pyramid, but it had 4 triangular sides. And it was $8 or $9, and I figured out how many weeks it would take me to save in order to buy that thing that I really wanted. And I just thought that was a huge lesson for me. And sometimes I would get an extra $1 from grandma or grandpa for a birthday or something. But that made me feel really good too, because I was the one who had that money. I decided what I wanted to spend it on. And that was something I knew would bring me a lot of joy. I played with it for quite a while. Another thing that my parents did though, is when Christmas came around, they wanted us to be engaged and give presents as well. So my mom would have a list of chores around the house only for about a month before Christmas. They had dollar values tied to them, well, cent values. So we could save up money and contribute and give presents to each other and our parents, which again, helped us feel a little more grown up, taught us about that, and was just for a certain time of the year. So it wasn't year round. We were getting compensated for chores. So those are just some things you could do maybe in the middle when it comes to an allowance. Because they do help kids make decisions. If they're spending their own money, if they have a little skin in the game, they are going to think about it a little more. They are going to learn more from that. And sometimes they are going to make mistakes, and that's great. We need to learn those things. We need to feel that pain, feel that mistake in order to learn not to do it again. And when you're a kid, those mistakes are much less, I don't want to say important, much less, well, I will say important than when you grow up and you never learned that lesson. So you do have to set guidelines for spending. There are things that aren't allowed in the house in general, so they couldn't spend their money on that, for example. And you do want to keep your end of the agreement. If you say, I'm going to give you a quarter a week or whatever it is, make sure it's something that it's sustainable for you, that you can make sure that you follow through with that, so they can expect you to make decisions based on that. The last slide of this part of the presentation before we look at older kids just talks about budget basics. So have your kids just keep track of the money they have coming in, what they did. If they walked the neighbor's dog for 10 bucks, they can write that in under income. And then just keep track of where their money is going. You know, in this example, a couple bucks on snacks, $8 for a movie, just so they know and can keep track of where their money is going. And really that just sets them up for the rest of their lives. I mean, there are many people who don't have a budget to this day, and it really helps us. We'll talk about budgeting in a couple slides. I'll go into a little more detail then, I guess. So we will go to how to teach teenagers about money. And really, it's all kind of the same skills, I think, just different variables, different points of your life where you have to apply them. Another thing I like about all this is something you can do with your kid, and at the same time you're doing it for yourself. You can come up with your own budget if you don't have a budget. So just when I think of a budget, I think of it as being very liberating. I don't think of it as being constrictive, because what you're doing with a budget, or what you're trying to do, is set goals. You have a certain time horizon. You want to buy X, or you want to go on X vacation by a certain date. And the certain date is important too, to make sure that you have a goal and you have a timeline associated with that. And then you can set a budget to see where your money is actually going. It can be very easy to lose track of where your money is going, how much you're spending on certain things, especially when you aggregate it over a week or a month or a year. And so when you're coming up with a budget and helping them with a budget, and you are just helping them, you're not telling them, you don't want to tell them what to spend their money on. This is for them to set their own priorities and use their own utility function. I'll just use an econ term there, to figure out what they want to spend their money on. But it helps liberate them to focus in the future about things they may want, how to free up money today to get those things that they may want to have in the future. So budgeting is incredibly important. You can make it as simple as you want or as complex as you want, but just do it and get used to it. On the next slide, there are some tips for saving. So save before spending. If you have a teenager that has some babysitting jobs or retail jobs or deliver newspapers, and just thinking of jobs I had, encourage them to save a certain dollar amount or a certain percent before they do spend. It's really important. When I think about what I do, is I work a lot with retirement plans. And a key to doing that is successfully is saving before you spend. You're saying, I want to put X percent away before I go out and spend the rest. And teaching kids that habit early on is incredibly important, especially with compound growth, which we'll get into in a little bit too. And as I mentioned before, encourage goal setting. So you're thinking about a specific dollar amount you want and a time horizon. Keep track of purchases. I mentioned that earlier too, just so you know where your money is going. The next thing on here is shop smart, shop sales. I do want to pause here just for a second, because when you're saving money, that's versus your income. So you're saying, I'm bringing in this much income, this is what I'm spending, and the balance of that is saving. Sometimes when we see a sale, we think we're saving money that we're not. So an example that I'll use is I had a friend who bought something for $40 and the original price tag on it was $100. And that friend said to me, I saved $60. I can spend $60 now on whatever I want. And that just made me go, wait, we need to talk about this. Sorry, I couldn't let that go. $40 is what you paid. It was worth $40 to you. If you could lead yourself into a trap of overspending if you think if you are measuring saving versus the first price tag you saw on something. And a really good example to drive that home is I was in a boutique shop and I saw they had some dresses, and one of them had a price tag of 21,000 euro, but it was marked down to 18 euro, just 18, not 18,000, 18. So if you went up and bought that dress for 18 euro, could you rightfully think that you saved 20,982 euro and therefore you could go spend that anywhere? Well, no. So, shop sales, buy things cheaper than you otherwise would. But when you're thinking about how much you're saving, that's versus your income, not versus the first price tag you saw on that thing. Next up on here is impulse buys. So you want to avoid impulse buys. I think a really good way to do that is if there is something you want, to give it a week. If you're still thinking about that thing, decide whether or not you want it at that time, but not buy it really quickly. And that's a lot tougher these days where you have one-click shopping. So do what you can to avoid impulse buys and teach your children to do the same. The next tip here, focus on dollars needed to save per day. It just takes a goal and shrinks it up to make it look a little more manageable. If there's something you want to buy at the end of the year that costs $365, just think about it as saving $1 a day. It seems like a much more attainable goal, and you feel better about yourself because you're reaching kind of marginal goals along the way to get to your final goal. The next one on here is have a buy nothing week. If you do that though, just make sure you don't buy it the week before or the week after, because then you're just pushing costs a few days out. So if you have a buy nothing week, just think of it as a way that you want to save a bunch of money in 1 week, or your kid. When I say you, I mean your kid or you, because this does apply to all of us. But that way you're actually saving money, and you have a good week, a week that you can feel pretty good about on your way to your goals. And then lastly, get buy-in and tips from friends and family. Kids are looking at friends and family all the time for good tips and bad tips. Kids will pick up on things that people aren't doing so well too, and they may want to have that conversation with you. So that's the last one on that slide. And I'm going to pick it up a little bit here, so I leave some time for questions and answers. But additional learning opportunities, opening bank accounts, that helps kids keep track of their money. I remember writing it down when I was a kid. There are apps and other things now. Interest isn't exciting now like it was in the 80s when there were higher rates of interest, and I would write down when I got interest in my account. But it helps kids keep track of money, knowing where it is. Credit card cautions, especially when you have teenagers that are getting older, 18 plus, they can get a credit card if they want to. And I think that's just a really important part there, or time to get out in front of them and just, if you pay it off every month, that's okay because you don't have interest. But if you don't, you can really get into trouble in a hurry. And one example I like is if you had a $3,000 balance at 18.9% interest, and you just paid off the $50 minimum, it would take over 15 years to pay back, and you would have paid over $9,000 for the thing that you originally paid $3,000 for. So really important to caution against credit card debt, like carrying debt over, because that can really go the wrong way on you. The next square, basics of money growth, that goes the other way. When you're thinking about compound growth over time, I think that is just a huge thing to teach. If you have kids that are 18, 20, 22, starting their first jobs at any time there, and they have a 401k plan, just really impress on them the fact that they have time on their side and how important that is. If you have, just as an example, if your kid saved $1,000 and the market went up 10%, just to make the math easy, 10% of 10,000 is $100. So that's a nice little bump. We all like $100. But if you keep saving, and if you have 100,000 in there, that same 10%, the same amount of work on 100,000 is 10,000. That's a much bigger bump. And the longer you can save, the bigger those bumps get in the future. So time is incredibly important, and really try to impress on them, teenagers or even early 20s, how important that is to do. That's what I always stress. Even when I taught econ and math, I would teach my students about that first. So just a couple slides here about making an impact today. Like we said, be an example. Demonstrate for them what you are trying to teach them. Kids are sponges, like I said. They are watching you for their cues on what they should do. And it makes a great opportunity for you to think about some things that you could do better with your financial life. When I listened to some podcasts and did extra research ahead of time for this, I thought of things that I hadn't thought of before. So be an example, and it can help put you in a better position as well as your kids. Do it together, give them insight on your decisions, why you're deciding to do things a certain way, like my mom telling me about replacing the dishwasher or whatever it was. Understanding that things cost money, you have to budget for what you want. Deferred gratification, getting kids to wait until they are able to have something that they want and save up for it. Those are all very key things to help put your kids on a better financial footing as they grow into adults and go out into the real world. So just be as transparent as you can with them. You probably don't want to tell them what you make in a year or what you spend on everything, but be as transparent as you can so they can learn directly from you. There are some online resources on the Wells Fargo website. Financial education is a tab if you just go up to the Wells Fargo website. Handsonbanking.org is financed by Wells Fargo, but it has tools for every stage of life out there. NFCC, if you go to their website, they have some calculators as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Gina.
Great. Thank you, Andy. And I just want to add one more resource as well. One of our other investment partners, American Century Investments, they also have a book that you can download for free called Raising Financially Aware Kids. Very simple, just go to americancentury.com/kids. I just did it this morning, put in my name, email address, and I got the free download right away. And I just started to peruse through the book, and it was really great. Just, really hitting on a lot of the topics Andy talked about today, but having the opportunity to go a little bit more into depth. So feel free to download that. Again, it's free and sponsored by American Century. And lastly, just want to remind you about the resources we have available again on our website. You'll find this presentation that'll be recorded and out there on the website, along with a lot of the presentations and webinars we've done in the past, and just some great educational information. And again, I mentioned this earlier in the presentation as I was introducing Andy, but Jessica, Jenna, and myself, like I said, we're just very passionate about financial literacy. And again, if any of you have questions or want to know more about some of the things we do, not just with our families, but when we volunteer for Best Prep, please just reach out, and we'd be happy to provide you with our experiences with Best Prep and teaching in the schools, and maybe connect you with any resources there as well. So again, on behalf of our team, I just want to thank you very much for joining us today. And I just want to thank Andy, such a wealth of information with your background in economics and finance and being a teacher and being a dad. Certainly appreciate it. And lastly, I just want to extend to everyone out there our good wishes that everyone stays healthy and well, and we'll get through this together. So hopefully you found this half hour of your time worthwhile. Thank you very much. I'm just going to check real quick. It doesn't look like we have any questions, but you know how to find us if you need to reach us. So again, thank you for your time, and thanks, Andy. Have a great day.
Thank you.